Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of SBJ Live. I'm Dan Kaufman with Sports Business Journal. Thank you so much for being here. As you are arriving in our webinar room here, I welcome you, and I will get to our great panelists in just a minute. But first, as everyone knows, I always like to give some instructions as people join our episodes of SBJ Live. And these instructions are meant to maximize your enjoyment of the episode. So please take a minute to listen as I go through these just very important instructions, and they're all around your engagement, which is an interesting word that we'll certainly be using today. But I want to talk about your engagement first and foremost. We want to make sure that you're interacting with us. So you'll see that the team on the Sports Business Journal side just dropped a note in the chat bubble on the right-hand side. And we'd love it if everyone else would do the same and introduce themselves, tell us who you are and where you're coming from. And if you see people in the chat bubble and you want to say hello to them, go ahead and do that. We encourage that type of interaction here. The other thing I want to let you know about is right next to the chat bubble is a questions bubble. If you click on that questions bubble, that's where we want you to submit your questions. You don't have to wait till the end to submit the questions. You can submit them at any time when they pop into your head. And if they're relevant to what we're talking about, I'll weave the question in throughout the conversation. And also, if you submit your question early on, it has the best chance of getting the most upvotes and the more likely that we will get to that question. So you can upvote questions that you see in that questions tab, submit questions, and chat with folks here as folks are entering the webinar room here. Okay, great. I am really looking forward to this. We're going to go for about 40 to 45 minutes, but we may go a little bit longer if we have some great engagement from the audience and a ton of questions. This is harnessing data to optimize your content supply chain and drive meaningful fan engagement. It's presented by our friends at Adobe. And I am really pleased to welcome to the SBJ Live stage Jen Zick. Jen is a principal digital strategy group, media and entertainment at Adobe. Mark Keeney, he is the chief revenue officer at Greenfly. And Aiden Lyons, he is the CEO at Fan Capital. Jen, Mark, Aiden, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to give each of you just a moment to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do. And I'll start with Aiden.
Hi there, guys. Aiden Lyons. I've spent nearly most of my career in sports. I've been at the NFL, worked in international soccer, Formula One, and this recently had the pleasure of launching Fan Capital about 7 or 8 months ago to help athletes, leagues, and teams grow the digital presence and monetize that digital presence.
Thank you, Aiden. Mark.
Love it. Mark Keeney. I am the Chief Revenue Officer of Greenfly. I joined Greenfly a little over a year ago. Prior to that, I spent 20 years in the media business, mostly with CBS and Viacom, a lot of sports properties within that, and then moved into social MarTech with two big companies, Sprinkler and Koros, and met the guys from Greenfly and saw an incredible opportunity to basically blend 20 years of my media and sports background with what I knew about social MarTech and joined this company, which Greenfly, essentially we are core infrastructure for short form content for the world's largest leagues and entertainment brands, essentially helping our customers create, collect, organize, and distribute content across their entire content ecosystem in every channel in near real time. So super excited to be here today. And thank you for joining.
Thanks, Mark. Jen.
Thanks, Dan. Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Zick. I lead industry strategy for sports and live entertainment at Adobe. I've been in the industry for about 20 years, working for Comcast Spectacor, Major League Baseball, and Live Nation Ticketmaster. For those of you who aren't aware, Adobe has built a super strong presence in the sports industry with large partnerships with many of the major leagues and teams, including ones abroad as well, like Fan Capital. And we really specialize in helping our sports clients connect fans with the experiences they love most, both in venue and watching from home. So we do this through our best in suite tools, from content creation to data-driven personalized fan journeys. And I know we'll get into a lot of this in more detail in the discussion to come. So looking forward to it.
Thank you, Jen. I see a ton of folks introducing themselves in the chat. Great to see. Please keep it up. And don't forget to submit your questions in the questions tab and upvote questions to get to. I've got plenty of questions and I want to get started. We're talking about the sports industry, obviously, and the sports industry is a place where we're blessed to have some of the best content in the world, if not the best content in the world. I want to start with maybe a general question to kick it off and set the stage for everyone here. I'm going to ask you guys to tell me how you're working with your respective clients to both capture and activate content so that it grows fandom? And Jen, can I start with you?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. We know the better the content, the better the reaction from fans. But the challenge we're seeing in sports is that it can be really messy and take longer than it should to get creative projects across the finish line. So Adobe has really focused on helping our clients with streamlining this end-to-end process from content capture all the way through to activation. And we refer to this as the content supply chain. The focus here is on unifying content and making it really easy to edit and put into action. So on the editing front, a popular offering in our creative suite is easily resizing and scaling approved assets across various activation channels. This is something that used to be cumbersome and still is for many of you listening, but now it can all be done with a couple clicks. And to zoom out a bit and give you a client example, when thinking about streamlining marketing departments from end to end, the KC Chiefs are top of mind for me, and they leveraged our Workfront tool to successfully automate and standardize work processes for, I think, 7 marketing departments and over 100 team members. So simplifying and streamlining are 2 of my favorite themes to talk about when it comes to content.
Thanks, Jen. I'll go down the line here. Mark.
I love that. Just thinking about Adobe and a lot of the content that flows through Greenfly, that actually starts with Adobe. But for us, it's really about speed of content delivery. I think that's the biggest thing we think about, like driving value for our league partners, but also really driving the authentic fan engagement. We oftentimes refer to it as the speed of social, right? Like these micro moments are happening in real time. A highlight that is played 3 days later is not as powerful as being able to kind of capture that moment and push that moment out in real time across any channel. And we think about different audiences like the audience's channel of choice. So for Greenfly, just like looking at this from a technical perspective, 3 primary use cases I think that we drive around this sort of speed of delivery, and one of which is live content capture. So allowing our customers to really create content and capture content in real time. Mentioned the Kansas City Chiefs. So from the end zone, around the stadium, tunnel walks, working with Premier League for around the pitch, creating moments in real time, and then being able to distribute them across any channel, share it with their broadcast partners, push it out on their league, team, or players' social channels in near real time. Second piece of that would be sponsor activation around that live content capture. So creating moments like, touchdowns in the end zone that are streamed real time on behalf of a sponsor like Verizon in a streaming from the sidelines campaign that you see all over social. And then I think the third piece really is being able to capture fan UGC and execute live campaigns that capture fan UGC, get the clearing rights to use that fan UGC, and then intersperse that into kind of the content strategy that's being pushed out around a game to really kind of take it from the field and into the social sphere to create real lasting fan engagement.
Thank you, Mark. Aiden.
Yeah, our challenges are a little bit different from a couple of fronts. First of all, just on a when we use the word content, it's a very broad word, right? So there's content which is original content, there's content which is game day, racetrack content, and then there's content created by interaction with either the athlete, team, or the league. I think what is really important for Fan Capital, given we are now up to 5 clients, we just signed Madison Skinner from Longhorns, Texas volleyball team, and soon to add more, is that we need to use generative AI to scale and be efficient on delivering on messages, capturing of the content, using our DAM to capture that content, and then having the ability to reuse that content again. As we look across our clients, athletes have a very different challenge from a team or a league. They have less access to content. They have less right to access that content. So we have to tell their story and communicate their story in a way that understands their time and their commitment and what they have to do to deliver. So we actually use our digital features. I know Mark used the word UGC. I think I've changed it to UGE, which is if you create really interactive digital features, the fans will come engage, they'll create content, and it takes less time for the athlete to do. Teams definitely have more access to that content, so it's less of a dependence. And then leagues, as we all know, even from my prior life, the NFL have the best content of all and can use that content to make Greenfly a very powerful tool. So for us, it's about efficiency, because as we scale, like I said, we have 5 clients now. It'll be more in the next coming months. You want to be able to use the generative AI to write your push notifications, write your emails, store your creative, create new creative, reuse creative. And that really helps you in the outbound communication. One of the things I was asked earlier on was, do you really think an athlete needs an app? What we've seen with Alex Logan is that 80% of the consumption comes through the app. The other thing that we found interesting was there's very little crossover between the athlete's audience and the team's audience. Mm-hmm. So the athletes reach a very different audience than the teams, and the demographics are very different. So the content you might produce for a team or a league, whereas stats, scores, schedules, highlights, is less what they want when they come to the athlete. More what they want in the athlete is who the athlete is, what they like, what they do, what their personality is. And that is a learning that we've learned over the last couple of months. But it's definitively that if we didn't have the technology from Adobe to help us be efficient and have one person doing all the messaging across all these properties, we just wouldn't survive.
Mm-hmm. Aidan, let's stay on that subject a little bit, and I'm going to flip it to Mark to maybe expand on it. But you mentioned, and Mark mentioned it first, user-generated content. You expanded it to user-generated experiences. You mentioned athlete-focused content versus team-focused content. Maybe I'll flip it to Mark. To Mark, tell us more about at Greenfly how you're addressing this shift that we've seen for some time now, maybe making athlete-focused content a little more important or equally as important as team-focused content.
Yeah, that is a great question, and it's funny. I think most of our league partners view providing content to their players as a service to their players to build their players' brands. But I think that just below the surface, there's also kind of a selfish quid pro quo there that I think they also recognize that the aggregate audience of the players is usually larger than that of the leagues or the teams. So creating this symbiotic relationship where you're creating compelling content and or getting compelling content from your players and providing them with a vehicle to kind of share that across their social channels, particularly authentic content. So if you're not just taking a highlight, sharing it with a player, but creating great in-game content that players can really embrace and share authentically across their social channels, we're seeing like a 7 to 10x increase in engagement. So we did a program with a European soccer club last summer that was on tour here in the United States, and they did an experiment with some of the what we would call live content capture around the pitch, and they provided content to players and teams that were really, instead of highlights or highlight clips, this kind of like really authentic content that was kind of captured really from the fan and the player's experience. And that content for them, it had a 7 to 10x increase in actual fan engagement. So that's really kind of where we're seeing the movement. It's one of the things that we happen to be a part of. It's one of the things that we do. But I think it's, when you think about content strategy, I think it's mapping your entire content ecosystem in a way where you can bring the league and the teams and the players together and then tie in broadcast partners, tie in your sponsors, tie in your fans in a way that, all of that creates amplification of engagement in messaging across all channels.
Sorry, Jen, what would you add to that conversation around the additional importance on athlete content as opposed to solely focusing on team content?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that shift to athlete-focused avidity. And for me, what I talk a lot about is data being central for knowing which fans favor which athletes. And I've just been a huge advocate for first-party data collection for the past 20 years. I've been talking about it for a long time, but I'm grateful that the technology is getting better and better at helping our clients actually achieve their first-party data strategy, because capturing these fan preferences and updating them regularly, because they certainly change from season to season. And also when you think about fans who are fantasy players. That's constantly changing, but this data is really core to these personalized fan experiences. So having those data mechanisms in place is such an important starting point. Once you have that data, we're seeing a lot of successful executions from clients. One example is targeting fans who follow specific players and letting them know when they're in town versus just local fans going to the home team game. So this opens up a high value segmentation opportunity for moving tickets. And when favorite player data is also another place we see it really important is driving off-season content. So we actually have a whole study on this because it becomes extra important when we look at things like streaming subscriptions and reducing churn. But if you don't have this favorite player data yet, you can still launch player-centric campaigns. We've seen things like when a player scores a goal or hits a home run, promoting the jersey or piece of memorabilia is a good action to take. And certainly there are always ways to be creative around your top athletes.
So one thing I would say that we've seen success in is usually when people ask someone to register, do something, it's like, just register, give us your name, your zip code, pick this, pick that. What we've done successfully is we've created an identity for each one of our clients. So for Williams Racing, we created a driver card. You get a driver card. You can customize your helmet, customize your number. We add in backgrounds. For Alex, we created his passport, which basically every Grand Prix you go to, you collect a passport stamp and you get stamped. And it's very done in the personality of Alex. And then for Logan, we're creating a training rarity that you get a different card for each training program. But what that does is it creates a connection with the athlete. And when the consumer or the fan is then passing the information, it doesn't feel like, oh, here I'm registering for something else. It feels like they're actually part of the fandom and part of that athlete or team or league's ecosystem, rather than just like, oh, I'm registering again. What am I opting in for? What is this? What is that? It's like the passport interaction we have for Alex is phenomenal. Like even when we released Sandevort for this weekend, I think it was like 70-80% interaction rate. So it's kind of key if you are collecting that data to create something around it which the fans can relate to.
Yeah, I love how you do this, Aidan, and we recommend that our clients take advantage of things like automated welcome programs via email and app when fans sign up to learn more about them, just like you said. And it's a perfect opportunity to capture things like favorite players, favorite athletes. And we've even done some research of our own on this, especially around younger generations, to understand their willingness to provide their preferences. And they actually, they love it. And it's nice because it's not as cryptic as sometimes just tracking behind the scenes activity. I mean, when you ask and they're providing this information, they know that that clients want to provide this personalized experience. But one thing I'll say is if you do collect this information, what we learned and what we see all the time is that fans expect then the personalization. So if they're giving you information on favorite player, favorite driver, then if you send them something that's generic, they're not going to have the best experience. They expect you to use that information and create a really nice, engaging experience for them across digital experiences as well as physical ones where possible. So just something to keep in mind. Once you start collecting, you want to be able to activate pretty quickly off that information.
Yeah, we've used AJO for that quite extensively. I think the other thing I did, I'll admit this, I ripped this off Delta when Delta send you then the email of the end of the year of your status and everything. We did it for our fans. So like how many badges have you downloaded? How many digital features have you interacted? How many? So it was pretty cool. So I agree. And the possibilities are endless. I think it's just more time is the constraint rather than the tools that are in place.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great segue. The constraints on time is a great segue to my next question. And at the outset, you'll recall that I mentioned that the quality of the content that we have in this industry is the best. The other thing that's unique about this industry, or that's somewhat unique about the industry, is just the sheer volume of content that we have and the timeliness of it all. The importance of it being in real time and live is no more as important as it is in the sports industry. I'll kick it to Aiden, and then I want to hear from everyone. But Aiden, you mentioned Gen AI. That obviously is where I think I want you to go with this, and where I think you are going to go. But the question is this: how do you manage all of that content in a short amount of time so that you can deliver quality assets to your clients?
Well, I mean, I think without Gen AI, we can't manage it. I think is the point, right? So if we have 5 clients and we want to get something in, a race result, an update, you need the ability to bring that in really quickly, and you need to be able to distribute it really quickly. If we have one person manage that across 5 clients, you can't do it if they're just doing it the old way, which is go to the Dropbox, download it, then upload it, then type the copy, then get the copy proofread. It just doesn't work. I think if you bring all the central location for your creative assets and your content assets into your DAM, then you have the ability to then push it out to your CMS. Your CMS is tied into your analytics. Your analytics will tell you what's working. And then within 5 minutes, you know that if you push something out for an athlete or a team, a league, what the efficacy of that was, good, bad, or indifferent. So I think it's centralizing where your repository is. That should be connected to your CMS. Then your CMS is connected to your analytics, and then you have the ability to rinse and repeat very quickly, or even iterate on what you push out in real time. Whereas the old day was like, here's your Dropbox links, download the assets, upload the assets, send it out, and then after that it's 5 hours old.
Jen, I want to flip it to you. Adobe has plenty of Gen AI offerings of late. How do you approach it when working with your clients? And in particular, how do you make sure that they solve the problem that Aiden was just talking about?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll start talking about volume, but then I'll get to timeliness. And Mark, you mentioned the importance of that earlier, and I totally agree, especially in sports. But on the volume front, we might see teams have, just for round numbers, let's say 50 to 100 assets per game, but scaling that content across the various activation channels that we see in marketing, factoring in various languages, and then personalizing it for the hundreds of thousands of fans that you have. This can easily require millions of content variations. So I know that sounded overwhelming really quickly, but with the latest in Gen AI, it's actually all possible. And like Aiden said, without Gen AI, it just wouldn't be possible. So for an Adobe example, when using Photoshop with Firefly embedded, clients are leveraging functionality like generative fill to do things like take a player image and swap out the background for localization, maybe when the team is traveling. Or clients are also using this feature to swap out other elements, again, like changing jersey colors from the home to the away games. And this can be done within seconds. So it's really easy. And this not only leads to huge time savings, but also cost savings when you consider things like additional photo shoots that would have otherwise had to happen. And we also see a lot of use cases around, I mentioned, I think, translating copy already, but translating copy across multiple languages is a bigger thing now, as more sports brands are looking to go global, but they don't have huge teams in all the local markets. So leveraging Gen AI and technology for that is really crucial to making it all happen. Now, from a timeliness perspective, we actually have a really good case study on our website. I think it's called From Courtside to Cloud. It's with the Golden State Warriors. And basically there, we helped equip their video crews with the right tools. For us, it's Premiere Pro, Frame.io, and tools like this provide for much faster workflows and video editing from anywhere. So what this resulted in for the Warriors is a timeline of 3 minutes from shoot to posting across social media. So this is so important for getting those big moments out to fans as soon as possible.
Mark, I'll flip it to you. Can you give us any examples of how Greenfly has been using Gen AI to improve processes?
Yeah, I actually, Dan, I love this question, and I was just thinking about Jen. I think she said 1 million assets, right? This big number.
1 million.
And I thought of 2 things. One, we work so with the content that's being created and curated within Adobe can come into Greenfly and be organized as part of that process. But that term millions, I think, is one of the challenges that a lot of our partners face, right? You've got this high volume of content from a variety of different inputs. You've got content being created around a stadium in game. You've got live broadcast feeds. You've got clips, highlights, social posts, UGC or UGE, according to Aiden, right? Both things. But when you think about all this content, and you think about where Greenfly comes into play, we AI is central to really how we help our customers organize content. We acquired a company a year ago, a best-in-class sports AI technology that allows us to use facial recognition, jersey and number recognition, logo detection, so really looking at like identifying the players, and then scene detection. So the ability, I'm going to use the example of the NHL, who a big partner of ours, and they won a Clio last year for best in class for the use of AI in partnership with Greenfly. And this kind of combines the original question, Dan, too, about like the shift to the players. They're essentially, when we think about the Greenfly platform, organizing all of that content that's coming from a variety of different endpoints. So that live content capture that's being created around a hockey game, content that's being pulled in, say, from a dam that might be assets that were created by the marketing organization with the help of Adobe. All that comes into Greenfly. And with our AI, it's then organized by team and by player in real time. And that allows us to essentially deliver content in near real time. So you think about a typical game for the NHL, there are 500 assets being created and organized within Greenfly. They had a 1,600% increase in players downloading and sharing content at postgame at last season as part of this Clio award, an 83% increase in fans using that content in their own social feeds. So you're kind of seeing how AI increases that speed of delivery, real compelling content getting in the right place at the right time. Now you've got high engagement numbers, and they're really driving great outcomes for their marketing results.
Thank you, Mark. I want to reiterate to the audience that make sure you submit your questions. It looks like we've got one that just came in, and I'll take a look at that in a moment. But submit your questions and upvote questions you want to make sure that we get to. I got another question, and this one's going to focus on ROI, right? Return on investment. It's certainly important. It's becoming more and more important, I think, in the sports industry as we think about sports sponsorships and how we can really use technology to value those sponsorships, or at least value where the money is being spent. I suspect that many of your clients are expecting that these days. Mark, can I stick with you? I mean, how are you measuring all the different points that might be able to deliver what you might say is an ROI? How do you do that? How do you deliver something to your client to make them satisfied, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, great question. And I think this is becoming more and more mission critical to not only understanding the value of what's happening today, but also creating alternative revenue streams. So in terms of understanding like ROI modeling and measurement of social metrics or sponsor value, the two basic table states are: how are they driving earned media? So when you think about a player sharing campaign, for example, like what is the total of assets that are being shared across social channels and what can be attributed to them in terms of earned social media? That's a big part of the ROI valuation. The second piece of this, and we work with one of our partners in our ecosystem, Greenfly, is about really looking at kind of like, and this is where AI comes into play, identifying assets that have a brand logo. So understanding that you've got a Bud Light logo showing up in X amount of images that are generating X amount of earned media. What's the actual sponsorship valuation around that? The third piece, which gets me most excited because I'm a chief revenue officer and I'm working with a lot of customers that are bringing in their sponsorship teams, is the ability to create kind of a new asset class using short form content to create a new asset class that lives outside of the traditional broadcast. A great example is WNBA and using their arrivals. So you've got all their players arriving in great outfits that all have, whether it's Oakley sunglasses or Adidas sneakers or some type of fashion display. That becomes a great piece of sponsorable content that really lives outside of the traditional broadcast rights. So that's kind of the third layer of ROI is can a sports league or team generate new streams of alternative revenue by creatively curating content that they can use for sponsorship.
Dan, if I just want to chime in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think what I've learned over like the last 2.5 years of Williams and then launching Fan Capital is when we deal with sponsors, there's what I would call is a traditional sponsorship, which is, logos and stickers on cars, shirts, and, an attribution across social and digital assets. And that is very traditional. And what I struggle with coming from the digital background I had is I'm like, don't you want some performance metric? Don't you want to understand at what level is the user engaging with you, and how do we improve that performance? And part of what we did on the Williams side is, those who know Formula One will know that Williams is still at the back of the grid. They're not winning yet. They will be in about 3 or 4 years' time. But what we had to do is we had to distinguish ourselves from the rest of the paddock. And we did that by understanding who we were pitching to, and then when we pitched to them, understanding what we were pitching them. So we have a crypto partner, and we built out a whole basically loyalty program on chain, Grid Pass, which I think we almost have 100,000 downloads of. So for me, there's a definitive shift in the market where traditionally sponsorship was B2B, and now you see these B2C companies coming over and like, look, I can't acquire on Facebook for, a $5 CPM anymore. I can't grow my audience there anymore. I'm just not getting the traction I used to be. And they're looking over the fence to these brands that have really great stickiness. Like Williams has great stickiness. Tottenham Hotspur has great stickiness. The LA Lakers has great stickiness. And they can provide stickiness to these partners. And they can also provide something that's not a commodity. Everybody has a digital wallet. What's the difference if you download my digital wallet? Oh, I get access to your athletes. So particularly being in market for the last 6 months, there's that change in that dynamic. And I keep hearing like performance marketing. It took me a while to understand the term, but performance marketing is what I've been doing all my career. But now it's transferred into the sponsorship world. And certain partners will want this performance marketing. And I think that's where Greenfly and Adobe have a unique opportunity, because we built all the tracking out and all the thing with Adobe's tools and with other components and with integration and with some custom builds. But it's definitely a big shift in the market. And you'll even see in the changes in the type of brands that are sponsoring now. It's very different. Go back and look at some football/soccer jerseys from 5 years ago. Go back and look at Formula One cars from 6-7 years ago. You just see the change in brands. It's quite shocking. Sorry. Couldn't find the right.
I totally agree on that sponsorship front. It's such a huge source of revenue. And I think we're running out of real estate on cars and on uniforms for just patches and logos. And we know sponsors want so much more than that, like we just said. And something else that we're seeing a lot of success with on our end is with data collaboration software and really sharing first-party data in a privacy-centric way so that sponsors are able to better target fans and also measure that ROI at the fan level, which is so important. And Mark, back to what you were saying earlier about the player-centric content. And for us, personalization is a huge source of revenue. And for Adobe clients to be able to take some of that player-centric content that Adobe is capturing and be able to grab it from our DAM and also activate on it at scale through some of our orchestrated journeys. That's a huge way that our clients are seeing much stronger ROI on their campaigns. Just to stay on that topic, because I know we would probably circle back for some extra thoughts also from Adobe's perspective. I covered streamlining internal operations a bit, which of course reduces costs, but I also want to highlight smart marketing planning, which is a little newer in terms of it working really well. So with this latest technology, marketers can leverage marketing mix modeling. We call it our product mix modeler, but it basically helps optimize planning across channels. So tools like this can surface an AI-powered dashboard, including important metrics, things like projected revenue, suggested marketing mix spend from different integrated data sources. But basically, the idea here is that you don't have to totally guess how much to spend on different activation channels. So this is always really nice. And we could also compare different marketing scenarios to inform investments before you click start on any campaigns. And then once campaigns are running, they could actually be monitored in flight to make ongoing adjustments as needed. So being able to set clients up for success and like I said, continuously monitor this, it's really helping with more positive ROI and just being able to continue and measure this and refine this over time is I think going to be a big win across the board in sports.
Jen, I know you mentioned dam there, but I'll tell you a funny story. Dam. So we built a dam. I'm like, this is going to be the greatest thing. This is what we need. All the assets stored in one place. And then I go look at the usage of dam, and no one's using the dam. And I'm like, why is no one using the dam? And it literally the case was they weren't using the dam because they were so used to downloading links and uploading links. So I mandated it. I said, if you don't use the dam, go find somewhere else to work. And then they all started using the dam. And then they're all coming back to me like, this is amazing. We can do this. We can do that. We can replicate this content. I'm like, so why weren't you using it before? Oh, it was easier the other way. I'm like,
Yeah, I hear you. And that organizational culture piece is so important. And we've talked about AI a bit, Gen AI a bit already. That's a big conversation that we have with clients all the time is fostering an organizational culture of experimentation and creating inspiration around the new technology that's available, because it is really important to make sure employees are educated, but also just have that mindset of willingness to be able to do things in a different way that we know ultimately they'll love. But I know we're also all guilty at times of just being stuck in our old habits. But this is what's exciting to me is the way that we work is evolving, and it's evolving in a way that's making us just all more productive and more creative. And so, it's just nice to talk about these use cases today because we have so many different angles of looking at it.
I think we scare people when we say Gen AI because we use it all the time. I guarantee everyone on this call uses ChatGPT. And when we built it just to spit out text messages and push notification copy. So I guarantee everyone uses it. Everyone's used a chatbot when they go and ask, where's my order? And that's generative AI. I think sometimes we scare people with the term. I mean, honestly, if I go back to the person writing our copy for 8 push notifications in one day, if he doesn't realize he's using generative AI, he is. And It just makes it so much more efficient. And I think, when the term first came out, I'm like, what does this actually mean? And I'm like, oh, I'm using it already. How do I use it better? How do I make it better? How do I scale it? It always comes back to how do I scale it?
Right.
But the dam for me was just a head scratcher. And now they're all like doing cartwheels.
Yeah, it is funny. And also, I think we've all had writer's block. So that's one of my favorite applications of Gen AI is drafting email copy or refining it, right? And for us, what's really nice is having those in context workflows. So you don't actually need to have like ChatGPT like open and like other products open, other screens open. You could do it within the platforms that you're using, which I think is a really nice bonus. But getting over that writer's block for me, it's one of my favorite applications.
Especially on
the you guys talk about this. Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. We've got a question from the audience that I do want to try to get to. We'll see if we can answer it. It's from Meg Brossi. Meg says, beyond the social media metrics you drive for your clients, how else are you leveraging the data you are capturing? And then she says, e.g. sports betting. Maybe let's ask that sports betting question. Are there any of you that are assessing sports betting? And I'll leave it open to anyone. And if the answer is we're not really looking at it yet, but we want to, that's fine as well.
Yeah, we're looking at it. It's definitely growing. I think what it comes down to is what we mentioned earlier, understanding fan preferences. So I think there are some fans that are really into sports betting, knowing who those fans are, and communicating to them accordingly is really important. I think with sports betting, there's an opportunity to educate too. Some people are curious about it, but they haven't tried yet, and being able to identify those fans and kind of introduce them to that concept, including offers that are tailored to them, and having some sort of drip campaign. I mean, you mentioned social, but certainly email's not dead in terms of an owned digital channel that we see a lot of success with. So being able to educate those fans on sports betting and warm them up to it, and of course do that in a responsible way. There's lots of regulations around sports betting that we all have to be aware of too. But I do see it growing, and I do see that opportunity for our clients to communicate that extra offering. But again, it's just knowing where fans are so that you can do it in the way that makes the most sense for them at the individual level.
Well said. Meg, thank you for the question. Aiden, anything to add?
Yeah, we're not doing sports betting. We do a lot of mini games which involve over under, and so not exactly betting, but creates more of a gamification aspect around it. Mm-hmm. But I would say there's a lot of betting companies we've spoken to that are very interested in that integration. And then, as Jen said, then driving that data, because the people who will interact with that will be more likely then to go place a bet.
Yeah. The only thing I'd add to this, I was just thinking the first part of the question, which is like beyond social media metrics. This isn't betting related, but it's a metric that I think is interesting. We've worked on kind of an algorithm using AI around shareability. So a shareability rating of like looking at the content that a league is aggregating and determining what is the higher shareability rating. So like from a player level, so that that kind of complements the traditional social media metrics of like engagement and broad reach. But what are the types of content that players are more likely to share, and getting more of that in the pipe? On the betting side, we're having some awesome conversations with different betting companies who are really interested in the speed of content delivery. So if they could tap in, like they sponsor most of the major leagues that we work with, even at the college level in different ways. And they're looking at, is there a way that they could access content in real time or near real time that's capturing a moment that might lead into the next bet, which I think is kind of interesting and awful all rolled into one. Like and I say that jokingly, but like it just, it's one of those things that's kind of interesting. Like imagine being on the 1 foot line of, are they going to go for it? Are they going to kick? Are they going to make this? Like capturing those real moments and converting it into gambling action, which is kind of awesome and interesting.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Mark. I mean, the gambling, the bets, they represent a tremendous data point, knowing what fans are interested in, right? So I think that's a huge opportunity as well when it comes to, community. And I compare it also to fantasy in a way too, like knowing what players, what games fans care about, and leveraging that to serve up the best content on, the website, another owns digital channel. That's really important, or in app, or, streaming to the extent that can be customized. We're seeing more and more happen there on that front. So definitely a great question. I'll be curious to see where betting goes and how it more fully integrates into the rest of the sports landscape.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Meg. I've got one more question to get you guys out on. I want to thank the audience for taking the time to be with us. And I do want to also let the audience know that we don't have an episode of SBJ Live next week, but we do the week after, just after Labor Day. We have our Reporters Roundtable focused on the issues around the start of the NFL season. So make sure that you register for that. Let's get to this last question to leave everyone on here. It's one where I think we'll probably end with the beginning. And I'll phrase the question this way. If there's someone in the audience who is fascinated by everything we said, but really is just starting, right? Just starting to think through how they can better leverage content to maximize fan engagement, where do they begin? Aiden, I'm going to start with you.
Measurement. You can have the best content in the world. If you don't know how it's doing or what it's doing, then you won't be able to understand. We just talked about fantasy. I know when I worked at the NFL that fantasy products drove 80% of the engagement from 20% of the users, right? I know on Alex's side, if we do anything related to him, personal-wise, it does 10x. So if you can't measure the content, don't understand the measurement component, then you can't optimize the content, and you will just be guessing. So I would start with your measurement. My background and what I grew up in was all analytics. I actually saw an old colleague of mine, Neil O'Keefe, who probably gave me the best grounding in understanding how to measure things. So yeah, for me, it's for measurement. If you can't measure, then you don't know how it's doing.
Thank you, Aiden. Mark.
I really like the measurement answer. I'm kind of like stumped on that. I'm like, I should have thought of that. I'll compliment a lot of the big leagues that we work with. Like Aiden earlier mentioned the NFL, like being just an incredible content machine. NBA, like when you think about the leagues that are getting it right have a comprehensive plan that goes league, team, players, right? It kind of cascades down. And then that plan also factors in sponsors, broadcast partners, local influencers. So having a strategic plan that really takes into consideration the entire content ecosystem around the league, the teams, and the players, I think is mission critical. The ones that don't get it, from my perspective, like leagues that we see that sort of have a plan at the top but not a plan at the bottom, you've got sort of stagnant content that is not necessarily, not said stagnant, but it's content that you can kind of get anywhere that's not necessarily driving pure fan engagement. But when you look at, again, using the NBA as an example, and Jen talked about in-app, which is something I probably should have talked about a few times, like their incredible content strategy involves every single channel, all their owned and operated channels, a great in-app experience that's personalized. And it's really just thoughtful. And it takes all of those different fans into consideration when it's building the foray. What are the channels of choice that these particular fan groups are going to be most engaged on? That's how you really maximize and optimize fan engagement.
Jen, the last word is yours.
I hate going last on this question. I totally agree with you, Mark and Aiden. I'm going to go with centralization. And we talked about this with content, and Aiden brought up the dam, and it's definitely important on the content front. It's also really important on the data front, because like we talked about, a big theme is needing data to power that personalized content at scale. So having a customer data platform, ideally a real-time customer data platform, because we talked about the importance of timeliness, especially in sports. We don't want content to get stale. I think foundationally, that's so important, and we all need a strong foundation to be successful.
Well said, Jen, Aiden, and Mark. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you to the audience for taking the time to be with us. Thank you to Adobe for the support. We couldn't do it without you. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.